Welcome to Afterlife Message, where we explore incredible stories of second chances, the afterlife, and the mysteries beyond. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the bell icon so you never miss a moment of these fascinating journeys. Let us begin the discussion.
All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep on a topic that I think you're really going to find fascinating.
Right.
We're talking near-death experiences. And I'll tell you, this isn't just some vague, hazy recollection.
Right.
We've got an interview with a man who not only survived a pretty terrifying drowning accident,
Right.
but came back with incredible clarity and detail about what he experienced during that time on the other side.
Well, and what really gets me is the stark contrast between his background and the whole experience. We're talking about an engineer, a very practical, problem-solving type of person.
Yeah.
And suddenly he finds himself in a situation that just completely defies all logic and really pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about consciousness.
It really does. It's almost as if that analytical mind of his made him like the perfect observer for something so deeply spiritual. You know what I mean? So are you ready to hear about this?
I'm totally ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So picture this, okay?
Yeah.
This guy, we'll call him John, is working on a research vessel off the coast of, let's say, the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
And they're testing this new submersible, and this massive storm rolls in.
And it's important to remember here that John is not, some weekend sailor who got caught in a squall.
Right.
I mean, this is a seasoned professional who understood the raw power of the ocean.
Yeah.
He knew the very real danger that they were in.
Oh, absolutely. He knew the risks,
Huh.
which makes his awareness during the actual accident even more incredible.
Yeah.
So they're battling this storm. They're trying desperately to make it back to harbor, but the harbor master won't let them in. The waves are crashing over the breakwater.
Oh, wow.
But they've got some crew that need to get to the airport.
Yeah.
So they decide to try to use this small inflatable boat, like a Zodiac,
Yeah.
to get closer to shore.
Those Zodiacs are tough, but nothing's really built to withstand the kind of conditions they were facing.
No, definitely not. So they're riding these huge swells, navigating through these like breaking waves, and all of a sudden it's like they just drove off a cliff, a watery cliff.
Oh my
A
God.
25-foot, maybe a 30-foot wave just slams into them.
Wow.
He describes the Zodiac just folding in half like it was made of paper.
The force of that must have been unbelievable.
Oh, incredible. He's thrown into this churning water, clinging to this, old beat-up life vest. And he's a strong swimmer. He knows that he can hold his breath for a while, but the waves just keep pushing him down deeper and deeper. And then he says the strangest thing happened.
So this is where the story takes that, really dramatic turn.
Yeah.
He describes the split second of burning salt water filling his lungs and then just complete silence.
Wow.
He finds himself suddenly outside of his body, enveloped in this darkness. But what's really interesting is instead of feeling fear, he's overcome with this feeling of peace.
It's like he went from this chaotic life or death struggle to just complete stillness.
Yeah.
Like no more crashing waves, no more cold, no more pain, just pure tranquility. And he even mentions feeling a presence, a sense of not being alone in that void.
That description of the void, that's a common thread we see in a lot of near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's often described as like a transitional space, a place of profound stillness
Yeah.
before the next stage unfolds. And for John, that next stage involved the appearance of light.
Yeah. And he starts to see this tiny speck of light way off in the distance. And as he focuses on it, he feels this irresistible pull toward it. And the closer he gets, the stronger this feeling of love and warmth becomes. He actually describes it as an embrace, like being welcomed home.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. As he approaches, he realizes it's not just a single beam of light, but it's made up of millions of these tiny fragments all swirling and moving together.
He actually compares it to like a school of fish. Each fragment has its own unique color, its own vibrancy, all moving in this incredible, almost choreographed dance.
Beautiful imagery.
It is. And then 3 of these fragments break away from the group and come right toward him.
And this is where the concept of what's called the soul family really comes into play.
I love that.
Have you ever had that experience where you meet someone for the first time and you feel this instant connection?
Oh, like you've known them forever.
Yes.
That's exactly what he describes, this profound sense of recognition, like coming home to a group of souls that he's always been connected to.
It's a beautiful image, the sense of belonging that transcends our earthly existence, And as he moves deeper into this light with these 3 soul family members, he enters what he describes as this giant sphere. And inside the sphere, something extraordinary happens. He starts to relive his entire life.
But it's not just a passive observation.
Right.
He relives each event from multiple perspectives, not just his own, but from the perspective of everyone he's ever interacted with.
So it's like he's got access to all these different facets of the same story.
Exactly.
He's seeing things through the eyes of his parents, his friends, even strangers he might have just bumped into on the street.
Wow.
He felt their emotions, their intentions. He saw the ripple effects of each interaction.
That highlights something really profound about near-death experiences. It's not about accomplishments or material possessions or status we achieve in this life.
Right. It's about the love we share, the kindness we extend, the positive impact that we have on others. It really makes you think, how might this shift your perspective on what it means to live a good life,
Yeah, it's definitely food for thought. But the life review, it's not the end of his journey.
Right.
After reliving his past, he starts to see things he doesn't even recognize. Things from a future he hasn't lived yet.
So it's like he's being shown glimpses of a potential future, a path laid out before him.
Yeah.
And at first it's disorienting because he has no reference for any of these events, right?
Always.
But his soul family is there, helping him, guiding him through it.
And while there's this clear central path, he also gets this feeling of choice. Like the possibility of deviating from that path. It's not set in stone, more like a map of possibilities.
I see.
And then, as he continues along this path, he encounters something even more extraordinary.
Okay.
The light itself speaks.
This is another common theme in a lot of near-death experiences, this encounter with a being that they perceive as God or some higher power.
Right.
And for John, the voice tells him that it's not his time, that he has to go back.
But he doesn't want to go back. Right.
Well, he's found this incredible sense of love and connection, this feeling of belonging in the light.
Yeah.
And the thought of returning to the physical world with all of its, pain and suffering is just unbearable. He begs the voice.
Yeah.
He argues that he's found his true home.
Wow. That resistance to returning, it's something we hear about a lot in these NDE accounts. The experience of unconditional love, of unity.
Right.
It's so profound that the thought of leaving it behind, it feels like a loss.
Yeah.
A separation from something essential.
It really does.
So what happens next? I mean, does he have to go back?
The light insists that he still has a purpose to fulfill in the physical world.
Oh, wow.
And with that, he suddenly finds himself back outside of his body, still caught in those rough, churning waves. But now he's watching it all unfold from a detached perspective.
So he's like a spectator to his own rescue. It's got to be surreal.
It is. He's just watching his body being tossed around, tangled in the wreckage of the Zodiac. And as the pull back to the physical world intensifies, he's desperately clinging to that memory, the understanding of his purpose, the message he received from the light.
It's like his consciousness is being drawn back into his physical form.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just on the edge of my seat here. So tell me, what happens next?
He's back in his body, clinging to that wreckage, tossed around in those stormy seas, and the memory of that experience in the light starts to fade.
Oh, man. So what happens next? Does he make it back to shore?
Even after surviving that drowning, his ordeal is far from over. He and his crewmates have to swim like a mile back to shore, clinging to pieces of that Zodiac. It's honestly incredible. They made it through all that.
Talk about resilience, the power of human connection.
Wow, that's incredible strength and determination. But I can only imagine what it must have been like to come back to the physical world after an experience like that. It was incredibly difficult. You see, while he's dealing with his physical injuries from the accident, dislocated shoulder, seriously injured thumb, the real struggle is happening internally.
Yeah.
He's grappling with this profound reality of his near-death experience and trying to reconcile it with, the more mundane aspects of everyday life.
I bet that was really disorienting.
It was. He described it as feeling like he was living in a dream, like the world around him had lost some of its solidity. And to make matters even more complicated, he starts experiencing these after effects, seeing auras around people, having intuitive knowings, things he can't explain. It's both fascinating and terrifying for him.
So what does he do? Who does he turn to for support?
Well, he tries to talk to his wife at the time, but she's scared by what he's describing. He can't really talk to his diving buddies either, you know? In that line of work, death just isn't something they talk about, so he isolates himself, tries to bury the experience and move on.
That sounds so lonely. It's like coming back from some incredible journey to this foreign land and having no one to share your stories with.
That's a great analogy. And even though he tries to push it away, that near-death experience, it changed him so profoundly.
Yeah.
He just can't erase what he saw and felt. It becomes a part of him, you know, shaping his perceptions, his understanding of the world.
So even though he's trying to suppress it, it continues to influence him.
It does, but in a positive way. He begins to focus on the things he can integrate into his life. The lessons of acceptance, tolerance, and the importance of personal truth. These become his guiding principles as he navigates this new reality.
It's like he takes the best parts of that experience,
Yeah.
the wisdom, and uses it to rebuild his life.
Exactly. It's really remarkable how he's able to find meaning and purpose even after such a profound and disorienting experience. But the story doesn't end there. 11 years later, something happens that completely shifts his perspective again.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What happened?
He has a second near-death experience.
Wow.
This time during meditation.
Really?
And in this experience, he's drawn back to that light and relives the entire previous journey, including the 11 years that have passed since the drowning.
Wow. A second experience. That's got to be some pretty compelling evidence for people who might be skeptical of NDEs. You know, the ones who might dismiss them as hallucinations or oxygen deprivation. But two separate experiences years apart.
It is compelling evidence.
How?
And this second experience becomes a pivotal moment for him. He realizes that he can't just pick and choose, you know, the parts of the NDE that are easy to digest. He has to embrace the whole thing, honor it, and allow it to guide him.
It's like he's being called to integrate this knowledge into his life. Not just intellectually, but to really live it.
Precisely. And that's exactly what he does.
Is it?
Starts exploring his spirituality more deeply, seeking out others who have had similar experiences, gradually weaving his NDE into his everyday life. But then another challenge emerges. And it's a challenge that was actually foreshadowed in his first near-death experience.
So those glimpses of the future he saw, they started to manifest in his life.
They did. During that first experience, one of the things he saw in his potential future was a vision of himself developing cancer. And sure enough, in his 40s, while he's working as a manager at a hospital, he starts experiencing this excruciating pain in his back.
I bet that was terrifying, knowing that it was coming, like watching a premonition unfold.
It was. He goes to the emergency room thinking it's just a pulled muscle or something. But as the nurses and doctors are running tests, he gets this feeling of deja vu. He's having flashbacks to that life review, and he knows with absolute certainty they're about to tell him he has cancer.
That weight of knowing what's coming but not being able to stop it, I can't even imagine.
His intuition is right. The doctor confirms his fears. High stage 4 cancer, aggressive, widespread.
Oh, wow. So what does he do? How does he face that challenge, knowing that he saw this coming years ago?
Well, they tell him to get his affairs in order.
Oh, God.
They say there's not much they can do, but he refuses to accept that. He remembers seeing himself living beyond the cancer in his NDE,
Right.
and he's determined to fight.
This is where that inner strength, that connection to something greater than himself really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He draws on his spiritual practice, on the lessons of acceptance and resilience that he learned from his NDEs. He really takes the time to carefully choose his care team, advocating for himself, insisting on a treatment plan that aligns with his intuitive understanding of his own body.
So he's not rejecting conventional medicine, but he's also incorporating those spiritual insights into his healing.
Exactly. He undergoes chemo and radiation, but he also incorporates holistic approaches, guided by his spiritual practice. He even describes having an angelic experience during this time, a vision that shows him how to manage the pain through mindfulness.
Wow.
So he can maintain that clarity he needs to connect with his spiritual guidance.
It's so powerful, the interconnectedness of the physical and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
He's not denying the reality of the illness, but he's not letting it define him either. He's drawing on every resource available to him.
And his intuition proves to be right. After 6 months of treatment, he feels a shift. He knows the cancer is gone. But the doctors are skeptical. They see him as a terminal patient, and they're reluctant to even run more tests.
Oh my gosh, that must have been so frustrating, knowing in his heart that he's healing but facing all that resistance.
It was. But he persists. You know, he uses his patient rights to advocate for himself, and eventually the tests confirm what he already knew. The cancer is in remission.
It's an amazing story of resilience, intuition, the power of the human spirit. But I'm curious what happens next. How does he navigate life after overcoming such incredible challenges?
It really is amazing to think about everything John's gone through, you know, from those depths of the drowning experience to battling cancer and all along this incredible connection to something much larger than himself.
It's such a powerful example of the resilience of the human spirit. And you know what? It's a remarkable story, but it's also relatable in a way. I mean, haven't we all faced those moments of, adversity, questioning our purpose, searching for something more?
Absolutely. We may not have those near-death experiences, but those feelings of connection, the search for meaning, those are universal.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes John's journey so compelling.
Sure.
He doesn't shy away from the challenges, the doubts, the difficulty of trying to integrate these profound spiritual insights into everyday life. So where does his story go from here? How does he navigate life after overcoming these incredible challenges?
Well, his journey does have lasting effects. The cancer treatments left him with some disabilities. He lives with chronic pain, loss of feeling in his feet and hands.
That's heartbreaking to go through so much, find this incredible inner strength, and then face these new physical challenges.
It is, but here's the thing. Even with these difficulties, he chooses to focus on living a full and meaningful life. He talks about embracing what he calls the duality of his human and spiritual selves.
What does he mean by that? The duality of human and spiritual selves.
He recognizes that, there are times when the demands of daily life, caring for his physical needs, require him to really focus on the human side of things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about finding a balance.
So it's like he's learned to honor both aspects of his being, the physical and the spiritual, without one overshadowing the other.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that even when he's focused on those more practical matters, he never loses sight of that interconnectedness he experienced in the light.
So he's always aware of that deeper connection, even in the midst of everyday life.
Right. And he believes that we all carry that fragment of that divine light within us, that spark of oneness that he experienced.
It's a beautiful thought, that we're all connected in this really profound way, even if we're not always aware of it.
It is. And he believes that by tapping into that connection, by consciously expanding our awareness, we can bring more love, compassion, and purpose into our lives and the world around us.
It's interesting, this idea of like a collective shift in consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that comes up a lot in these conversations about NDEs. Do you think humanity is evolving in that way? Becoming more aware of our spiritual nature?
It's hard to say for certain, but there does seem to be this growing openness to these ideas, People are searching for meaning, for connection, for something beyond the material world. And these experiences, like John's, they offer a glimpse into what might be possible.
It's a hopeful message that even in the face of suffering, loss, and uncertainty, there's this potential for really profound growth and transformation.
What I find so inspiring about John's story is that he doesn't present himself as some kind of enlightened guru.
Right.
He's just a regular guy who had this extraordinary experience, and he's just trying to make sense of it, integrate it into his life, and share what he's learned.
He's like a bridge between those two worlds, the everyday and the extraordinary. And his message is one of empowerment, that we all have the potential to access this deeper connection, this inner wisdom, and create a more loving and meaningful life for ourselves and for others.
Absolutely. And his story reminds us that we're not alone in this journey. There are countless others out there who have had these experiences, who are grappling with the same questions, and who are committed to creating a more compassionate and interconnected world.
As we wrap up this deep dive into John's incredible story, what are some of the key takeaways that stand out for you? What's really resonating?
I think that reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's always potential for healing, for growth, for transformation, and that we all have the power to choose love, to choose connection, to choose a path that leads to a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners, what are some things they can take away from John's journey? What are some questions they might want to ponder?
Well, it's worth asking ourselves, what are the things in our lives that truly matter? What are our deepest values, and are we living those values in our actions and our interactions with others?
Those are great questions to consider. And maybe, just maybe, John's story can inspire all of us to open our minds to those new possibilities, to explore our own spirituality, and to embrace the mystery and wonder of this human experience.
Exactly. To remember that we're not just physical beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. And that within each of us lies that potential for incredible love, resilience, and connection.
This has been such a powerful and moving conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and helping us to understand this incredible story.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We hope that John's story continues to inspire you, challenge you, and empower you to live a life that's filled with purpose, meaning, and love.